In the shadow of a fractured hour, when the earth held its breath and the heavens wept in silent agony, a stillness descended. A stillness so deep it seemed to cradle the world in its trembling arms. Its weight a mystery etched into the fabric of time, its silence a prelude to the divine. A hush that reverberated with the pulse of eternity. A quiet that spoke of the unseen. A pause that held the breath of creation. A moment that paused the stars. A breath that stilled the winds. At the precise moment when Jesus, the Lamb of God, surrendered his spirit upon the rugged cross, the very foundations of creation shuddered with a force unseen. A tremor that rippled through the cosmos like a wave of divine intent. A movement that shook the stars. A pulse that stirred the heavens. A vibration that moved the earth. And 7 astonishing events unfolded instantly. Their echoes reverberating through the corridors of eternity like a celestial hymn sung by unseen choirs. Their notes a promise, their melody a grace, their harmony a love, their rhythm a hope. The sky darkened with an unnatural gloom that swallowed the light, casting a pall over the land, its depth a shadow, its weight a burden, its thickness a veil, its opacity a sorrow. The ground quaked with a power that split stone asunder, its force a judgment, its strength a sign, its might a call, its energy a light. And divine manifestations pierced the veil between heaven and earth, startling those who bore witness and proclaiming that this death was no ordinary end, but a gateway to a new dawn, a threshold to redemption, a portal to grace, a door to salvation, a path to light, a road to peace, a journey to joy. What transpired in those fleeting, sacred moments beneath the shadowed hill of Golgotha, where the air hung heavy with destiny, its scent a burden, its touch a weight, its breath a prayer, its pulse a hope? What hidden significance lies within these occurrences, stirring the hearts of believers and skeptics alike even now? Centuries removed from that hallowed day, their mystery a call, their whisper a plea, their voice a hope, their sound a grace, their echo a love. Prepare to journey into the heart of that hour, to uncover the 7 signs that marked Jesus' death as the most pivotal moment in human history, a moment that forever altered the course of destiny, a moment that whispers still through the ages, calling to the soul with a voice that pierces the silence, a sound that heals, a tone that saves, a cry that redeems, a song that lifts, a melody that restores. Imagine standing at the foot of Golgotha, the air heavy with the scent of dust swirling in the breeze, its grit a reminder of the earth's toil, the metallic tang of blood lingering from the wounds that wept like tears, the distant cries of the crowd mingling with the creak of the rugged cross against the wind, its groan a lament that pierces the silence, its wood a witness to suffering, its texture a story etched in pain, its surface a sacrifice, its grain a prayer, its fibers a hope, its knots a grace. Around noon, when the sun should have cast its golden rays across the parched land, bathing the hills in warmth and life, its light a gift, its glow a blessing, its radiance a joy, its warmth a love. An inexplicable shadow descended, cloaking the earth in a veil of darkness so dense it swallowed the light, its touch a cold hand pressing upon every soul, its weight a shroud that smothered hope, its depth a mystery, its blackness a judgment, its thickness a veil, its opacity a sorrow, its depth a pain. This phenomenon lingered for 3 hours, from noon until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, precisely as Jesus hung in agony. his body a sacrifice against the darkened sky, his breath a prayer that rose like incense, his silence a power, his stillness a grace, his presence a light, his suffering a love, his pain a hope. The Gospel of Matthew records this marvel with solemn clarity. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. Matthew 27:45. Its words a testament to the unnatural, its tone a reverence, its voice a witness, its sound a call, its echo a grace, its resonance a peace. But what caused this shroud of night in the day, this eclipse of hope, this veil of gloom, this curtain of despair, this shadow of doom, this cloak of night, this blanket of sorrow? Some speculate it was a solar eclipse, a celestial dance of moon and sun in harmonious conflict, a ballet of light and shadow, a play of night and day, a drama of heaven, a theater of stars. Yet the Jewish Passover, occurring during a full moon, renders such an event impossible. Its harmony a contradiction, its rhythm a denial, its light a lie, its glow a myth, its radiance a dream, its brilliance a fallacy, its shine a deception. Could this be a spiritual sign, a manifestation of divine will rather than a natural anomaly? A judgment written in the heavens with a quill of fire? A decree from the throne, a command from the Father, a voice from the Spirit, a word from the Son? In Jewish tradition, darkness often heralded divine judgment, a portent of God's wrath against sin, a shadow of his justice, a veil of his righteousness, a cloak of his mercy, a mantle of his love, a robe of his grace. As the prophet Amos foretold with a trembling voice, "In that day, declares the sovereign Lord, I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in broad daylight." Amos 8:9. His words a prophecy fulfilled, his breath a warning, his cry a lament, his tone a grace, his sound a hope, his voice a light. This darkness was no mere coincidence. It was a cosmic acknowledgement of the judgment Jesus bore for humanity's sin, a weight he carried upon his shoulders as the sky wept, its tears a shadow, its silence a sermon, its gloom a grace, its depth a love, its blackness a sacrifice, its night a redemption, its void a mercy. Can you picture the panic that gripped Jerusalem? The sun's absence a silent preacher, the air thick with the scent of fear and uncertainty, the sound of hushed whispers rising like a tide, the feel of cold dread upon your skin, the touch of despair on your heart, the weight of awe in your soul, the burden of wonder in your mind, the depth of mystery in your spirit, the height of reverence in your faith. Have you ever felt a darkness in your own life? A shadow that presses upon your spirit, its weight a burden, its depth a trial, its blackness a pain, its gloom a sorrow, its night a fear, its dusk a doubt. And did you seek the light it promised, the hope it veiled, the grace it offered, the salvation it hinted, the peace it held, the joy it whispered, the love it carried, the mercy it bestowed? As the hours stretched in this unnatural twilight, the spiritual significance deepened, its depth a mystery unfolding like a scroll in the divine hand, its pages a revelation, its lines a truth, its words a light, its ink a grace, its script a love. Shortly before his death, Jesus cried out with a voice raw with anguish, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27:46. His words an echo of Psalm 22, a messianic prophecy that foretold the suffering of God's anointed one. Its verses a lament and a promise. Its lines a hope. Its stanzas a prayer. Its rhythm a grace. Its melody a love. Its harmony a peace. Its cadence a joy. This cry was not a wail of despair, a surrender to the void, a capitulation to death, a yielding to the dark, a giving to the night, a loss to the storm, a fall to the abyss, but a fulfillment, a bridge between the Old Testament shadows and the new dawn breaking upon the world. Its light a salvation, its rays a grace, its glow a love, its warmth a hope, its brilliance a joy, its radiance a peace. The Father turned his face away, not in rejection, a abandonment of love, a forsaking of the Son, a turning from the light, a withdrawal of grace, a departure of hope, a leaving of faith, but to pour out the fullness of judgment upon sin, a burden Jesus willingly shouldered, his sacrifice a bridge to redemption, his blood a covenant, his pain a gift, his suffering a joy, his agony a peace, his torment a love, his cross a grace. Imagine the onlookers, their hearts pounding in their chests, the scent of fear mingling with the dust that coated their sandals, the sound of his voice cutting through the gloom like a blade, its resonance a call, its tone a plea, the feel of the cold air a witness, the touch of the wind a sorrow, the weight of the moment a burden, the depth of the silence a grace, the height of the cry a hope, the breadth of the pain a love. The Talmud, a revered record of rabbinic tradition, notes an unusual darkness around the crucifixion, suggesting even Jesus' opponents felt its weight, their breaths shallow with unease, their eyes wide with dread, their hands trembling with doubt, their spirits shaken with awe, their souls pierced with wonder, their hearts stirred with fear, their minds opened with grace, their faith touched with light. What does this darkness stir within you? Fear that grips the soul, awe that lifts the spirit, or a call to reflect on your own sins? Their shadows cast upon your heart, their weight a chain, their burden a guilt, their depth a sorrow, their darkness a pain, their night a loss, their gloom a regret? Could it be that this moment invites you to see the cost of redemption, to hear the whisper of forgiveness amid the gloom, to feel the weight of love that bore it all, to touch the grace that heals, to embrace the mercy that saves, to accept the peace that restores, to receive the joy that lifts, to hold the hope that endures, to grasp the faith that saves? Then came a sign within the temple itself, a moment that left the priests in stunned silence, their robes trembling with the shock, their voices stilled by awe, their hearts pierced by wonder, their spirits lifted by grace, their minds opened by truth, their souls touched by love, their faith stirred by hope. At the exact instant Jesus gave up his spirit, the veil separating the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple, a curtain some 18 meters high, woven from sturdy fabrics, its texture a testament to human craft, its thickness a barrier, its strength a wall, its beauty a symbol, its presence a divide, its weight a judgment, its height a mystery, tore in two from top to bottom, an act beyond the strength of mortal hands, its sound a rip that echoed through the sacred halls, its vibration a thunder that shook the sanctuary, its force a judgment, its power a light, its energy a hope, its might a grace, its strength a love. Matthew 27:51 declares with awe, "At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom." Its words, a witness to the divine. its tone a proclamation, its voice a cry, its sound a grace, its echo a love, its resonance a peace. The detail of its direction is key. A tier from top to bottom signifies divine intervention, a hand from heaven, a will from above, a power from the throne, a strength from the Father, a force from the Spirit, a love from the Son, a grace from the Lamb, not the work of human effort, its origin a mystery, its source a might, its root a love, its foundation a mercy, its base a hope, its ground a joy. In the Old Testament, the temple was the dwelling place of God among his people. Its Holy of Holies so sacred that only the high priest entered once a year on the Day of Atonement, offering sacrifices for sin. The air thick with the scent of blood and incense, the sound of chants a ritual, the feel of holiness a weight, the presence of awe a burden, the touch of reverence a grace, the weight of glory a call, the depth of mystery a light, the height of sanctity a love. The veil symbolized the separation between a holy God and sinful humanity, a barrier erected by transgression, its presence a reminder of the divide, its fabric a wall, its threads a judgment, its weave a curse, its texture a sin, its strength a chain, its durability a divide. But with Jesus' death, that barrier was shattered, its threads undone by divine will, its seams rent by grace, its structure broken by love, its fabric torn by mercy, its curtain lifted by hope, its wall destroyed by faith, its gate opened by peace. Hebrews 10:19-20 confirms this truth with reverence. Therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way opened for us through the curtain, that is, his body. Its promise a door, its path a light, its way a hope, its road a grace, its journey a love, its destination a joy. Imagine the priest's shock, the air filled with the scent of incense now disrupted by the wind of change, the sacred boundary gone, its absence a revelation, the sound of the tear a judgment, the feel of the air a freedom, the touch of the Spirit a hope, the weight of the moment a grace, the depth of the silence a love, the height of the wonder a joy, the breadth of the peace a strength. This tearing signified that through Christ's sacrifice, all have direct access to God, rendering the old system of sacrifices obsolete, its rituals a shadow cast aside, its altars a memory, its fires a past, its smoke a dream, its ashes a loss, its embers a regret, its flames a shadow. Does this open door stir your heart to approach God more boldly? Its threshold a grace, its step a hope, its crossing a joy, its entrance a love, its path a peace, its way a light, its road a salvation? Or do you hesitate, fearing your unworthiness, your sins a chain, your guilt a shadow, your doubt a wall, your fear a barrier, your shame a weight, your regret a burden, your sorrow a pain? As the veil fell, the earth responded with a violent quake, a tremor that shook Jerusalem to its core, its rumble a proclamation of divine power, its sound a witness to the heavens, its force a sign, its strength a call, its energy a light, its might a grace, its power a love. Matthew 27:51 continues with awe. The earth shook, and the rocks split, its words a testament to the force unleashed, its voice a cry that resounded, its echo a judgment, its tone a grace, its pitch a hope, its sound a love, its vibration a joy. This was no ordinary earthquake. It was a divine sign, filling all with terror, its shockwaves a testimony, its vibrations a call, its tremors a witness, its power a light, its might a strength, its force a joy, its energy a peace. Jerusalem had known tremors before, their memory a whisper in the stones, their echo a past, their sound a reminder, their feel a history, their touch a lesson, their weight a grace, their presence a sign. But this one, timed with Jesus' last breath, split rocks with a crack that echoed through the valleys, damaged the city with a groan that resounded, its stones a lament, its walls a cry, its foundations a witness, its ruins a sign, its debris a hope, its fragments a light, and open tombs with a shudder, its depth a mystery, its power a revelation, its strength a promise, its force a hope, its energy a grace, its light a love, its warmth a joy. In the Old Testament, earthquakes marked God's presence in judgment. When he gave the law to Moses on Mount Sinai, the mountain trembled with a roar that shook the heavens. Exodus 19:18. Its peak a witness, its base a throne, its summit a glory, its height a power, its strength a call, its force a sign, its might a grace. And Nahum declared with solemnity, the earth trembles at his presence, the world and all who live in it. Nahum 1:5. Its voice a thunder, its sound a judgment, its power a sign, its weight a grace, its force a love, its depth a mercy, its breadth a hope. This quake signified the breaking of the old covenant, the transition to a new era sealed in Christ's blood, its seal a promise, its mark a grace, its bond a love, its tie a strength, its chain a hope, its link a joy, its cord a peace. Creation itself reacted, proclaiming the victory over sin and death, its stones a choir, its earth a witness, its ground a testimony, its soil a song, its dust a prayer, its air a grace, its breath a love. Imagine the panic, houses swaying like reeds in the storm, their creak a fear, their bend a doubt, their sway a loss, their tilt a cry, their lean a sorrow, rocks cracking with a sound that pierced the air, its sharpness a cry, its edge a pain, its break a judgment, its split a sign, its fracture a hope. The ground beneath your feet alive with divine power, its pulse a life, its beat a hope, its rhythm a grace, its movement a joy, its tremor a light, its shake a love, its quiver a peace. Does this shaking awaken a reverence in you? A awe that lifts the spirit? A wonder that inspires? A joy that heals? A peace that restores? A love that saves? A grace that lifts? A hope that endures? Or do you question its meaning in your own life's upheavals? Its tremors a call? Its quakes a challenge? Its movements a test? Its shifts a trial? Its changes a grace? Its transformations a hope? Its evolutions a light? Yet, the most astonishing sign followed, a miracle that defied the grave, a wonder that pierced the silence, a marvel that stunned the ages, a glory that lit the dark, a light that broke the night, a hope that dawned, a joy that rose. Tombs broke open, and the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. Their steps a marvel, their presence a testimony, their return a sign, their awakening a hope, their rising a joy, their walking a grace, their living a love. Matthew 27:52-53 recounts with reverence. The tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. Its words a witness, its sound a song, its echo a hope, its voice a grace, its tone a love, its rhythm a peace, its melody a joy. Who were these saints, and how did this occur? Their rising a mystery, their awakening a sign, their life a wonder, their presence a light, their return a promise, their resurrection a joy, their existence a grace. They were faithful ones who had lived for God, their lives a light in the darkness, their deeds a prayer, their faith a flame, their devotion a song, their righteousness a beacon, their holiness a crown, their purity a gift, their sanctity a hope, their resurrection a preview of Christ's power over death, its victory a hymn, its triumph a joy, its glory a promise, its strength a hope, its might a love, its force a peace. Jesus had declared with authority, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die." John 11:25. His words a promise, his voice a hope, his breath a life, his tone a love, his sound a grace, his echo a salvation, his resonance a joy. This event, though completed after his resurrection, began at his death, a sign of victory already unfolding. Its dawn a light, its morning a grace, its day a promise, its hour a salvation, its minute a joy, its second a hope, its moment a love. Imagine the streets of Jerusalem, filled with the scent of dust and awe, the air alive with the sound of footsteps long silent, their rhythm a miracle, their beat a wonder, their cadence a joy, their pulse a life, their tread a grace, their march a hope. As loved ones long gone walked again, their presence a testimony, their voices a whisper, their faces a hope, their eyes a light, their smiles a grace, their touch a love, their hands a peace, their embrace a joy. Does this miracle stir your faith in the promise of resurrection? Its light a comfort, its warmth a joy, its glow a peace, its radiance a hope, its brilliance a strength, its shine a love, its luster a grace? Or do you wrestle with its mystery, its depth a challenge, its wonder a question, its enigma a call, its depth a trial, its height a faith, its breadth a grace, its length a hope, its width a peace? Amid this chaos of signs, a Roman centurion, a man hardened by the brutality of war, his heart a stone forged in the fires of battle, his spirit a fortress of steel, his soul a bastion of strength, his mind a wall, his will a shield, his courage a blade, witnessed it all, his eyes a witness to the divine, his gaze a search, his sight a hope, his vision a light, his perception a grace. He had overseen Jesus' crucifixion, perhaps ordering the nails driven into his hands and feet, the air thick with the sound of hammer on iron, its clang a judgment, its echo a pain, its ring a sorrow, its beat a burden, its rhythm a cry, its pulse a weight, its cadence a grief, the scent of blood and sweat a load that clung to the air, the feel of the cross a pressure that pressed, the touch of the wood a suffering, the grip of the nails a agony, the weight of the moment a cross, the burden of the hour a sacrifice, the strain of the day a love. But as the darkness fell like a shroud over the land, its depth a mystery, its weight a gloom, its thickness a veil, its opacity a sorrow, its blackness a pain. The earth shook with a force that split stone, its rumble a thunder, its crack a judgment, its sound a cry, its vibration a power, its energy a sign, its strength a light. And the tombs opened with a groan, their sound a marvel, their creak a hope, their opening a light, their release a grace, their freedom a love, their liberation a joy. His heart shifted, its hardness cracking like the rocks around him, its stone giving way to flesh, its wall yielding to grace, its fortress opening to love, its shield breaking to mercy, its blade softening to peace. Matthew 27:54 records with awe. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." And this pagan soldier, serving Rome's might, its power a shadow, its glory a pride, its strength a chain, its rule a burden, its law a weight, its throne a darkness, recognized Jesus' divinity, a turning point sealed by Jesus' prayer. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Luke 23:34. His words a mercy, his voice a grace, his breath a love, his tone a hope, his sound a salvation, his cry a peace, his whisper a joy. Imagine his awe, the scent of blood and dust giving way to reverence, the sound of his own breath a confession, the feel of the trembling ground a witness, the touch of fear a transformation, the weight of wonder a light, the depth of joy a peace, the height of faith a strength, the breadth of love a grace, the length of hope a salvation. Does this transformation inspire you to seek forgiveness? Its grace a gift? Its flow a river? Its current a hope? Its stream a love? Its water a joy? Its tide a peace? Its wave a mercy? Or do you hold on to guilt? Its shadow a weight? Its burden a chain? Its load a sorrow? Its darkness a prison? Its night a fear? Its gloom a doubt? Its depth a pain? The crowd, too, was changed. Their mockery turned to remorse, their hearts a battleground of sin and grace, their spirits a field of conflict, their souls a war, their minds a struggle, their wills a fight. Once shouting for crucifixion, their voices a chorus of scorn, their cries a judgment, their words a curse, their tones a hate, their sounds a rage, their shouts a darkness. They beat their breasts in anguish, as Luke 23:48 notes. When all the people who had gathered to witness this sight saw what took place, they beat their breasts and went away, their hands a lament, their fists a plea, their touch a sorrow, their strike a prayer, their motion a grace, their action a hope, their gesture a love. The signs, darkness that cloaked the land, the torn veil that opened the holy, the quake that shook the earth, the resurrections that amazed the living, turned scorn to fear, its grip a terror, its hold a dread, its power a call, its strength a light, its force a hope, its energy a love, its might a grace. Some repented, later joining the faith at Pentecost with 3,000 souls converted. Acts 2:41. Their hearts a harvest, their spirits a light, their lives a testimony, their faith a song, their love a grace, their joy a peace, their hope a strength, while others hardened their hearts, even bribing guards to lie about Jesus' resurrection. Matthew 28:11-15. Their denial a shadow, their deceit a wall, their lie a chain, their truth a loss, their faith a void, their hope a dream, their trust a fall. The temple's destruction in AD 70 fulfilled Jesus' prophecy. Not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. Matthew 24:2. Its fall a judgment, its ruin a sign, its collapse a warning, its silence a grief, its absence a lesson, its emptiness a call, its desolation a grace. What would you have done, faced with such signs? Their power a call, their light a guide, their voice a summons, their touch a grace, their presence a hope, their strength a love, their energy a joy? Are you open to the Spirit's call, its whisper a hope, its sound a grace, its tone a love, its rhythm a joy, its beat a peace, its pulse a light? Or do you resist, fearing the cost, its price a sacrifice, its weight a cross, its burden a love, its price a joy, its load a peace, its cost a grace, its value a hope? These events hold lessons for us today. Their meaning a light that pierces the dark, their truth a beacon, their wisdom a guide, their grace a hope, their love a strength, their peace a joy. They reveal Jesus' identity as the Son of God, the Lamb who was slain, the King who died, the Savior who rose, the Lord who lives, the light who shines, the hope who endures, and the new access to his presence. A door flung wide, a gate of grace, a portal of hope, a path of light, a road to peace, a journey to joy, a way to love, urging us to respond with faith, its step a trust, its leap a hope, its bound a joy, its flight a love, its rise a grace, its ascent a peace, its climb a strength. Ignoring them, as some did, leads to spiritual loss, its consequence a void, its penalty a shadow, its end a silence, its absence a death, its emptiness a sorrow, its darkness a pain, its night a grief, its dusk a regret. Ask yourself, do you see these signs in your life? Their echoes a whisper in your heart, their light a call, their voice a plea, their touch a grace, their presence a hope, their sound a love, their rhythm a joy? Seek the Holy Spirit daily. Repent with a contrite heart. Acts 19. Its sorrow a cleansing, its tears a grace, its pain a hope, its cry a love, its moan a joy, its lament a peace. Pray boldly with faith. Luke 11, 9-13. Its cry a hope, its shout a trust, its voice a love, its sound a joy, its prayer a peace, its plea a grace, and obey his call with courage. Acts 32. Its step a strength, its walk a love, its path a joy, its way a peace, its road a grace, its journey a hope. What step will you take today to embrace this truth? Its promise a hope, its light a guide, its grace a salvation, its mercy a song, its peace a light, its love a strength, its joy a blessing, its faith a love,